Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we are continuing our series on a witch's poisons in depth, and we are picking up on Hellebore again. I've already put up two videos, one on the etymology and history and one on the medicinal uses of Hellebore. Today we are covering the magical uses of Hellebore. Please remember to like and subscribe and not treat this video as medical advice because it isn't meant to be medical advice. All right, let's get into it. Culinary uses. Even in ancient records, Hellebore was not used for culinary purposes, as most cultures recognized that it was incredibly poisonous. It was used for medicine and magic, but not as a food. So I did go looking. I was like, you know, sometimes it turns out that people are eating shit that I'm going, why would you do that? And there are definitely things that we eat that are poisonous that we make not poisonous via our method of cooking them. I, for one, eat poke salad, which is made from Phytolacca americana, which is pokeweed, which is absolutely poisonous. And you have to make it in a really precise method in order for it not to be poisonous anymore. One of these days I'll teach a class on it, but it is not this day. Okay. Magical uses. In ancient Greece, Hellebore was believed to relieve madness, even if caused by a spell or by the direct influence of a deity. In medieval astrology, the legendary Hellenistic figure of Hermes Trismegistus, the purported author of the Hermetica, a series of pseudo-epigraphical ancient and medieval texts, connected Hellebore with the demon star Algol. The star is in the constellation of Perseus and represents the head of Medusa. According to the medieval Hermetic texts, under the influence of the fixed star, the juice of the black hellebore and wormwood placed under a diamond could alter the diamond to act as a talisman that made one hateful and courageous, as well as protecting and preserving the body and bringing vengeance upon a person's enemies. This can be found in the Book of Hermes on the 15 fixed stars. Medieval texts also claim that Hellebore's Niger, black hellebore, could be carried as an amulet of protection, just as a mandragora root could be. In medieval magic, Hellebore was cited to be able to cause or cure demonic possession, madness, and epilepsy. If a person was already suffering from any of these conditions, a small dose of the powdered roots and leaves was said to calm and possibly cure them. If someone was not already suffering from any of these conditions, then a higher dose of the same could bring them on. In medieval accounts, one use of Hellebore was to alter the nature of other plants magically. This could be done by grafting living Hellebore onto a living plant, or by powdering the Hellebore and scattering it on the soil around the plant like a fertilizer. The baneful properties of the Hellebore were said to transfer to the plants. So non-poisonous or harmful plants were made into poisonous or harmful versions of themselves. This was referred to as blighting. During the witch trials in Europe, some witches were accused of using Hellebore for this purpose in order to poison crops. In the 3 books of occult philosophy, Henry Cornelius Agrippa, also called Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa von Nettensheim, who lived from 1486 CE to 1535 CE, the German polymath, physician, legal scholar, soldier, theologian, and occult writer, associated black hellebore with Mars and Saturn and said it should be used in the fumigation of talismans with the same correspondence. He also stated, "Therefore some physicians, by some certain confections made of vipers and hellebore, and the flesh of some kind of animals, do restore youth, and indeed do sometimes restore it so, as Medea restored old Peleus." Hellebore is mentioned in the Key of Solomon the King, the Clavicula Salomonis, a pseudo-epigraphical grimoire falsely attributed to King Solomon that likely dates to the 14th or 15th century of the Italian Renaissance. Hellebore is used to vivify a talisman with the genius of Saturn. This consecration consists in exposing the talisman to the fumes of a scent composed of alum, asafoetida, scammony, and sulfur, which are burned with cypress ash and stalks of black hellebore, lighted in an earthenware chafing dish, which has never been used for any other purpose, and which has to be ground to dust and buried secretly in an unfrequented spot after the operation. For conjuring the planetary genius of Mars, the Liber Juratus recommends a fumigant made from euphorborium, bdellium, armoniac, 2 kinds of hellebore, myrrh, the brains of a raven, human blood, blood of a black cat, sulfur, and the powder of a stone called magnus. Hellebore may have been used as an ingredient in flying ointment, which is used by witches from antiquity through to modern times in order to induce an entheogenic and hallucinatory out-of-body experience. I did actually find records of this in the witch trials, like a witch who said, I used an ointment that consisted of hellebore combined with these other ingredients. You can find that in the history of hellebore class, which I've already posted to YouTube. Let me see if I can put this into words. Information extracted under torture isn't actionable information. Like interrogation that produces intel via torture is not reliable interrogation. It's not reliable intel. However, I have encountered modern usage of hellebore in flying ointments as well. So do I believe that it likely was an ingredient in at least some medieval flying ointment recipes? Yeah, I do, because it's used in recipes now. I have a recipe written down that it has hellebore in it, but the recipe that I use most of the time does not have hellebore in it, because hellebore causes blistering and skin irritation, and it's a topically applied ointment. So the one that I use, I don't use that one. Right. In Victorian plant lore, which is often connected with some people's versions of witchcraft, hellebore was associated with innocence and hope. As mentioned in the History of Hellebore class, Mrs. M. Grieve claimed in A Modern Herbal that there was French lore about a sorcerer who utilized black hellebore in order to give himself the power of invisibility by throwing the powdered plant in the air about himself. I was unable to find an older source for this other than the book A Modern Herbal by M. Grieve, which was published in the 1930s CE. In Switzerland, in the area called Zurich Oberland, there was an oracular ritual where 12 hellebore buds were dropped into water on Christmas. Each bud represented a month of the year. The buds that opened represented months that would have good weather and bounty, and those that stayed closed represented lean months or months of struggle. In up to modern times in Zurich, if the hellebore turns the color of wine when it begins to wilt, this is said to predict a good wine year. If it turns brown when it wilts, it's said to predict a bad one. In Germany, in the Rhineland-Palatinate, hellebore was sometimes referred to as the wine flower because if they bloomed a lot, the wine harvest would be good that year. So I'm actually really intrigued if there is some kind of relationship in the soil with hellebore where it is actually predicting the conditions that affect the wine. And if this is maybe one of the reasons why the Greeks believed that there was a connection between the spirit of wine grapes and the spirit of hellebore. And if for witches there is some kind of connection that can be relied upon. So my personal magic would then be interested, because I'm intending to grow muscadine grapes over the next couple of years on my property, to see if I could engage that plant connection between those two plant spirits in some way in my personal practice. So if I ever do it, I'll let y'all know how it goes. Anyway, in modern witchcraft, hellebore has been used for everything from exorcism, banishment, protection, curses, vengeance, connection with the afterlife, summoning malicious and or harmful and or subversive entities, rebirth, the magical treatment of mental illness, and so much more, including, as I said, in flying ointment. It is commonly associated in neo-pagan and pagan reconstructionist circles with Hecate. Household uses. Various hellebores have traditionally been used as parasitides for body lice, fleas, and other small pests. As hellebore is an irritant that can cause skin burnings and ulcerations, this isn't a use that I personally would recommend. Hellebore is in common use as a ground cover in gardens in the United States as it spreads rapidly and blooms early, or in some areas and with some species is evergreen. Other uses. One compound isolated from hellebore flowers has been used in the making of perfumes. Alright, so I actually have even more notes on hellebore, which have already gone out to our patrons. These notes include the description of Helleborus niger, Helleborus viridis, Helleborus orientalis, and Helleborus foetidus, where to find each of those, and the cultivation of each of those, and the harvesting and storage instructions. I normally don't recite all of that on YouTube because I found that it makes the classes really long. It isn't really the content that most people are looking for, and people stop watching. So if that's information you want, you can either become a patron and I'll send the notes, or if I get a lot of requests to start including that as videos, I will do so. And there will be another video in the Witches Poisons Hellebore series that goes into how to identify, where to find them, and how to cultivate and how to harvest and store those plants. And that's everything. Thank you all so much for joining us. Please remember, as I said at the beginning of the video, to like and subscribe, maybe leave us a comment, suggest other classes that you want to see from us. And as usual, I'll just say that patrons do gain access to exclusive content, including the notes for this entire series on Hellebore. You can find us on Patreon under Sanctum of the Craft. And thank you so much for your ongoing viewership and support. Be safe out there, everyone.